In this digital day and age where life is defined by algorithms, being cringe has become the ultimate crime. We've collectively built a hierarchy where attractive, successful, and effortlessly relatable people sit at the top, and everyone else is constantly measured against them. Step even a fraction outside the carefully drawn lines of societal norms, and suddenly you're labeled as cringe, a fate somehow more terrifying than being cancelled. Cringe isn't just embarrassment anymore. It's a public, quantifiable verdict, delivered and amplified by platforms designed to reward conformity and punish awkwardness. Every post, story, or TikTok you create is a performance, judged not just by human eyes, but by invisible algorithms that decide who deserves attention and who disappears into the void. Minor mistakes, an odd expression, a slightly off aesthetic, a clumsy joke can be transformed into viral ridicule, shared as a cautionary tale for everyone scrolling by. Over time, the quirks and imperfections that make us human, the very things that used to define individuality, become liabilities. We begin to censor ourselves before we even hit post, carefully curating every action, every word, every reaction to fit the invisible mold. The result is a society obsessed with perfection disguised as relatability, where authenticity is measured in engagement metrics, spontaneity is discouraged, and the natural chaos of human expressions is treated as a flaw. In short, fear of being cringe doesn't just shape how we act online, it shapes how we exist, forcing us to perform even the most intimate parts of ourselves for the approval of an indifferent digital audience. Fear of being cringe is amplified by both algorithms and human social instincts, but it isn't just about what we post, it's about how we exist. Every platform rewards attention, but the attention often skews towards the extremes: shock, absurdity, or hyperconformity. Ironically, cringe itself can be a golden ticket to visibility. Some people go viral precisely because their quirks, mannerisms, or unapologetic self-expression hit a nerve, whether that's intentional or accidental. The paradox is obvious. Things society tells us to fear, like being awkward, confident while not fitting beauty standards, or embracing niche subcultures like the furry community, can actually make someone magnetic online. And yet for most of us, the same environment feels threatening. Every gesture, laugh, outfit, or personal interest is subject to judgment. You can be charismatic, confident, or simply human, and still risk being labeled cringe by others who value safety, familiarity, or trend conformity. The pressure isn't about what we create, it's about how we exist in the world and how visible, authentic human expression becomes a gamble. The irony is that some of the most viral content comes from people leaning fully into these perceived flaws, unapologetically themselves, while the majority of us suppress mannerisms, quirks, and identities to avoid ridicule. Later, we'll explore the difference between embracing these traits intentionally for attention and simply existing as yourself in ways that society may call cringe, because that distinction is crucial to understanding both online culture and human behavior. The fear of being labeled cringe is deeply rooted in human social psychology. As social creatures, we've evolved to seek approval from our communities and avoid behaviors that might result in ostracism or rejection. In order to understand exactly why cringe even exists, we have to understand what the concept of social contagion is. Social contagion is the spread of behaviors, emotions, or ideas through a group or network, often unconsciously, as people mimic or are influenced by others. It explains how phenomena like moods, trends, or even panic can propagate quickly within communities. If you've seen the plain episode of House MD, the mass hysteria experienced by the characters is an example of rapid mass social contagion. But Sealbees, how does this tie into cringe? Good question. Social contagion is a concept that humans are aware of from a young age. It's how babies learn facial expressions, it's why they cry when you overreact to them bumping their head, and it's how language is learned. Just an example, when I was 3 years old and in kindergarten, I overheard my parents use the word fosh, which translates to an informal, rude way of saying diarrhea in Hungarian. Because I heard this word being used by a trusted adult, due to social contagion, I thought this was an appropriate word to use. And I said it to my kindy teacher with the confidence of a 3-year-old who just learned a new word, of course. We are more connected as a society than we have ever been thanks to technology, and this is a very rapid change that only occurred within the last 15 years or so. In today's day and age, to not be available 24/7 is a cardinal sin. Whether for friends, family, or for work, you have to be constantly tethered to the people around you. When you mix this extreme level of interconnectedness with an apathetic society, you also get a fear of social contagion from certain groups. This is defined by a myriad of factors, but the primary one is the need for conformity. The phrase "just be yourself" only extends so far, but being yourself too much can result in social ostracization. There's a reason cringe compilations predominantly feature alternative, fat, queer, disabled, and ugly people. These people do not fit the societal mold and are thus cast aside. Their peers do not perceive them as equals, but rather as someone to avoid. If you engage, there is a chance you might catch their mannerisms, their ideology, and their way of life. And the best way to protect yourself? To create a barrier, of course. Initially, humans mostly operated on a me versus you mindset. Individual survival and personal interests dominated. In small groups, competition over food, mates, or resources meant that prioritizing oneself often had immediate survival benefits. This is literally baked into our biology. We're wired to notice threats to ourselves first. The transition to us versus them came as humans started living in larger, more complex social groups. Several forces drove this. Number 1. Cooperation for survival. Hunting, gathering, and later agriculture required coordinated effort. Group cohesion meant that looking out for others in our community directly increased your own chances of survival. Suddenly, us mattered almost as much as me. Number 2. Shared identity and norms. Language, rituals, and culture reinforced the sense of belonging. People began seeing themselves as a part of a collective, which strengthened the distinction between us and outsiders. Number 3. Trust and reputation. As social networks grew, maintaining alliances and reciprocal relationships became crucial. Favoring us, the in-group, over them, the outsiders, protected resources and social bonds. Number 4. Defense and competition with other groups. Conflicts with other groups further reinforced in-group loyalty. Distinguishing us versus them helped mobilize cooperation against threats. So evolution nudged us from self-interest towards group interest, and culture amplified it. Us versus them is basically a social contagion on a larger scale. Emotions, beliefs, and norms get shared within a group, creating cohesion, identity, and often rivalry with outsiders. So how does cringe come into this? Well, think about it. If you want to distance yourself from certain mannerisms, would it be socially easier if you just created a group to stay away from on the basis of lack of conformity? When we label someone as cringe, we are drawing an invisible boundary around our in-group. Historically, this group used to be your tribe, your village, family, or whatever community you surrounded yourself with. Nowadays, it's the entire internet. In this day and age, this boundary isn't just there psychologically, it is performative. When you engage with a cringe post, you're performing for us. You're performing for your in-group of people who do and can conform. Comments like deleting comments I see when a fat woman displaying confidence has a majority positive comment section, or wrist check on an alternative person's post is a signal to the us that you are a safe and cool person, unlike the person you're commenting on. It signals to your in-group that the reason you're engaging with the post is because you're here to other yourself further, to laugh, to poke fun at, and to engage with something alien that is off-putting to you. This performative engagement reinforces the boundary. The person being labeled as cringe becomes the them that the in-group can safely mock, analyze, or distance themselves from. And the ironic part? The very act of othering someone for being different only strengthens their visibility. Every laugh, every comment, every meme about them is another signal flare broadcasting their existence to the masses. Meanwhile, those in the in-group maintain their sense of belonging and superiority, comforted by conformity and the illusion of control. Cringe, then, isn't just an insult or a fleeting feeling of embarrassment. It's a social mechanism, a way for communities to police boundaries, enforce norms, and regulate what behaviors, appearances, and identities are considered acceptable. In the hyper-connected digital age, this ancient instinct to separate us from them has been amplified, accelerated, and codified, making fear of being cringe not just a personal anxiety but a survival strategy within a landscape of judgment, visibility, and endless performance. Cringe occupies a strange, contradictory space in digital culture. It's simultaneously punished and rewarded, feared and fetishized. Society constantly tells us to suppress quirks, eccentricities, and unconventional behaviors, creating anxiety around simply existing as ourselves. And yet, the very traits that earn the label of cringe, awkwardness, bold confidence, niche hobbies, or exaggerated mannerisms, can also make someone go viral. Paradox is glaring. The same qualities that terrify us with the prospect of judgment are often the ones that draw attention, admiration, or even admiration disguised as mockery. Intentional viral cringe leverages this dynamic consciously, turning perceived flaws into content strategies, while accidental cringe, simply existing outside our conventional norms, can produce the exact same exposure without any intent, leaving the individual embarrassed, confused, or unexpectedly celebrated. This creates a culture where people constantly oscillate between hiding authentic aspects of themselves to avoid shame and leaning into perceived cringe to capture attention, blurring the line between genuine expression and performance. In other words, the fear of being cringe isn't just a minor social anxiety, it's a central force shaping how we present ourselves, navigate communities, and negotiate visibility in a world where judgment and virality are inseparable. This paradox of cringe, simultaneously feared, shamed, and rewarded, has given a rise to a whole new online phenomenon: The cringe account. These are profiles that exist entirely to perform cringe, often exaggerating awkwardness, eccentricity, or niche interests to an absurd degree. Accounts like divorcedad83 on Instagram don't just exist for entertainment. They exploit the tension between fear and fascination. By deliberately acting cringe, they bait unsuspecting viewers who react with judgment, mockery, or incredulity, exactly the responses that drive engagement. In doing so, these accounts turn the social mechanisms of cringe inside out, using what was once a mark of shame as a tool for attention, virality, and even subversive commentary on online culture. Understanding these parody accounts helps illuminate the complex dance between accidental cringe, intentional performance, and the way digital audiences police and are entertained by social norms. Now, I am no saint when it comes to engaging with cringe. I personally have a couple of cringe accounts I enjoy following. For example, I have been absolutely obsessed with this one account on Instagram who goes by divorcedad83. On the surface, his content might seem simple. Relationship advice, what would you do if we blank scenarios, and the occasional bizarre date video. But what makes it truly fascinating isn't just the topics he covers, it's the man behind the camera. A middle-aged bald guy with the confidence, swagger, and an unapologetic attitude of a stereotypical fuckboy. He embodies an energy that feels entirely out of place and almost surreal to the average viewer. This odd dichotomy is exactly what makes his content addictive. He's simultaneously performing masculinity, cringe, and a subtle sense of parody, creating a tension between discomfort and fascination that keeps audiences hooked. Watching him is like observing someone walking the tightrope between painfully awkward and irresistibly magnetic, leaving viewers unsure whether they should laugh, cringe, judge, or secretly admire him. What makes divorcedad83 even more compelling is the ambiguity of his performance. Accounts like his exist in a liminal space between parody and authenticity. Is he a genuine eccentric personality, a calculated performer designed for viral attention, or a parody account exploiting the very concept of cringe to bait unsuspecting viewers? The brilliance of accounts like this is that they leverage the audience's own social instincts. Every awkward gesture, brash statement, or overconfident wink functions as bait, pulling viewers into engagement loops where their reactions, likes, comments, shares, and even mockery serve to reinforce belonging within the in-group, while simultaneously amplifying the visibility of the cringe subject. In other words, we become complicit in the dynamics we fear, judging, isolating, and performing conformity ourselves, all while someone divorcedad83 benefits from our participation. The paradox is fascinating. His content exposes the mechanics of digital culture. Cringe, once a marker of shame, is now a tool weaponized for attention, entertainment, and cultural commentary. By leaning fully into behaviors that many would consider awkward, embarrassing, or socially unacceptable, he challenges viewers' assumptions about performance, confidence, and social norms. In a way, divorcedad83 exemplifies the evolution of cringe in the algorithmic age. It's no longer accidental or accidental alone. It can be harnessed deliberately, exaggerated, and repackaged into virality. Watching his account, we see a microcosm of digital culture itself, a landscape where visibility, judgment, entertainment, and identity collide, where the lines between authenticity and performance blur, and where the very behaviors we are told to suppress can be the most powerful currency of all. Okay, this is great and all, but why is it specifically ruining your life? I know this video sounds like a weird art kid frothing at the mouth about conformity, and in all honesty, that's what it really is. We as a society have become so interconnected, yet somehow so disconnected at the same time, that the othering of people has become not only a trend, but in some cases a revenue stream for some. From cringe compilations to reaction videos, cringe is now a revenue stream. It's no longer just a way to socially distance, but it's also a way to earn income. The issue with this is that while a creator may tell their followers to not harass the people being featured, not all followers will follow their instructions. This can result in genuine hate mobs, doxing, stalking, and in extreme cases, threaten lives. Being cringe openly is no longer just a quirky way to express yourself, it's a genuine threat to your safety. What used to be a minor social discomfort or playful teasing has been amplified by algorithms, global connectivity, and audiences eager to participate in judgment. A single post, gesture, or video can reach thousands, even millions of people in minutes, many of whom feel entitled to evaluate, mock, or criticize. The problem is compounded by the blurred lines between intentional and accidental cringe. Those who perform cringe for entertainment like parody accounts often walk a tightrope. They thrive on reactions without necessarily considering the collateral damage inflicted on the people who resemble their targets or who engage authentically in similar behaviors. And for the individuals simply existing outside the mainstream, the stakes are even higher. What is meant as self-expression, being confident, eccentric, or just human, can trigger harassment, public shaming, or worse. Cringe in this sense is no longer a personal quirk or humorous observation. It has become a digital hazard, a mechanism that can endanger the very people it claims to entertain or analyze. This individuality and risk collide, and the cost of being too human can be frighteningly real. But, just because you're cringe doesn't mean your entire life is doomed. I'm talking about notorious outliers like Chris Chan, the absolute extreme of extreme, whose experiences are hardly the norm. Most people exist in a much messier, nuanced middle ground where being awkward, unconventional, or just cringe adjacent might get you some teasing online, but it doesn't erase nor affect your friends, your career, or your happiness. Awareness of risk doesn't just mean paralysis, it means making choices about how boldly, weirdly, or joyfully you want to show up. The issue with this intrinsic fear of being cringe is that it not only bleeds into online life, but into the real world too. I'm a relatively alternative girly. I love my goth makeup with white foundation and my scene bangs. I have had people actively follow me and bark at me in real life, yelling threats, all while I was in the middle of breaking up with my ex. And this also generates a fear of being perceived as cringe in the real world. I know so many friends who have cringy interests that they actively hide to appear normal. The problem is when you constantly censor yourself to avoid being perceived as cringe, you end up dulling the very things that make you you. You hide your quirks, your passions, and the things that excite you in order to fit the mold of what society considers acceptable. Over time, this isn't just exhausting, it's soul-crushing. Your identity gets compressed, your creativity stagnates, and the joy of authentic expression is replaced by anxiety, self-monitoring, and endless cycle of people-pleasing. And ultimately, that is what the anti-cringe movement is about, people-pleasing. To become a victim of anti-cringe culture is to become a victim of chronic people-pleasing, not just on a personal scale but on a societal one. When you dull yourself to appease others, you're living in inauthenticity, which is only sustainable for so long before the cracks start to show. It's why people tell you to be yourself on a first date. The flaws, the cringe, the unconventional parts will spill out eventually. This constant facade of perfection can only last so long if you want a fulfilling life. This extends to body positivity, sexuality, gender, disability, and everything unconventional. When you live in fear of being cringe, you are essentially negotiating your existence around other people's comfort rather than your own joy or self-expression. The irony is that the very traits you suppress, the boldness, the awkwardness, the unapologetic individuality, are often what make life rich, memorable, and meaningful. By constantly policing yourself, you might avoid immediate judgment, but you also deprive yourself of connection, creativity, and authentic experiences. Life becomes a careful exercise in invisibility, where the safest path is conformity, and the cost is a sense of quiet emptiness. This constant fear of being cringe is basically a full-time job in impression management, and yes, this literally affects your health, by the way. Sociologist Erving Goffman described everyday life as a performance where people are always managing how others perceive them, tweaking behaviors, expressions, and even thoughts to fit social expectations. When you're obsessively self-monitoring, thinking, is this too weird? Am I cringe? Will they judge me? You're engaging in what psychologists call high self-monitoring, and it's not just mentally exhausting. Chronic self-surveillance can raise stress hormones, mess with sleep, and even contribute to anxiety and depression. Your body reacts as if you're under constant threat because societal judgment is basically processed like real danger by your brain. So yeah, hiding your quirks to avoid cringe doesn't just suck for your soul. It can actually make your health take a hit, all because society decided that weirdness is a capital crime. The antidote isn't reckless exposure or ignoring consequences, but it's conscious courage, choosing to exist fully, to embrace the parts of yourself society might label as cringe, while still understanding your environment and your safety. There's power in owning your quirks, in expressing your interests openly, and in allowing yourself to fail, look awkward, or simply be human. Leaning into cringe, thoughtfully, intentionally, and with a sense of humor, can be very liberating actually. It transforms fear into agency, shame into playfulness, and judgment into a mirror you choose whether or not to internalize. In a culture obsessed with perfection, leaning into what makes you cringe just might be the most authentic, joyous, and radical thing you can do. Leaning into cringe confronts the invisible, pervasive rules that dictate how we are allowed to exist in public and online spaces. Most of us spend enormous amounts of energy editing ourselves to appear polished, competent, and socially acceptable, carefully curating every gesture, post, and comment to avoid judgment. To embrace what society labels as cringe is to deliberately step outside of that framework, to act, create, and exist without shrinking yourself to fit expectations. It challenges the hierarchies of taste, attractiveness, and popularity that govern our digital and social lives, exposing them as arbitrary and constructed rather than natural or inevitable. By openly expressing your quirks, awkwardness, and unconventional interests, you assert a kind of agency that refuses to allow fear or shame or ridicule to dictate your behavior. In doing so, you create a space not only for yourself, but for others who feel the pressure to conform, showing that imperfection, eccentricity, and bold individuality are valid and even valuable. There's a subtle power in this. Every time someone laughs, mocks, or raises an eyebrows, you remain fully present, unshaken, and authentic, transforming the mechanisms of judgment into a stage for self-expression. In a culture obsessed with curated perfection, leaning into cringe is radical because it demands vulnerability, confidence, and willingness to be seen in your own terms. It is not merely defiance, it's a reclamation of identity, a declaration that human imperfection, awkwardness, and audacity are not liabilities. They are strengths. The radical part of leaning into cringe isn't just rebellion. It's actually liberation. It's a simple, profound act of refusing to let the fear dictate which parts of yourself to get to exist. Don't kill the part of you that is naturally awkward, eccentric, or over the top. Kill the part that panics, judges, or silences that energy. Let yourself laugh at your own missteps, celebrate your quirks, and move boldly through spaces that try to tell you how to act, what to like, or who to be. Being cringe is not a flaw. It's proof of life, individuality, of joy, unfiltered by the expectations of others. The more you embrace it consciously, the freer you become, and the more permission you give to others to do the same. Be awkward, be bold, be ridiculous, be tender, be loud, be quiet, be everything you are, because in a world obsessed with conformity, choosing to exist fully, joyfully, and unapologetically is the most radical act of all.